President Obama may have been vague on details in his inaugural speech on Monday, but I'll give him this. He couldn't have been clearer about the tone and the direction that he has in mind for the second term. Gone is the post-partisan rhetoric that propelled him onto the national stage and into the White House. In its place, an unabashedly left-wing appeal for more bureaucratic control and centralized power here in Washington. On Monday, we saw a president and a party that appeared to have shifted into reverse and jammed on the gas. For Democrats in the Obama age, the era of big government being over is officially over. And anybody who disagrees with their approach isn't just wrong. They're not just standing in the way of progress. They're malevolent. They're the bad guys. They're the ones who want to take food away from children. They want the old and the infirm to suffer. They want to choose between caring for the people who built this country, as the president put it on Monday, and investing in those who will build our future. Now, I don't know if the president really buys all this stuff. I don't know if he believes his own caricature. I certainly hope not. But one thing I do know is that questioning the intentions of one's political opponents makes it awfully hard to get anything done in a representative democracy. As the president himself said, without so much as a hint of irony, we cannot mistake absolutism for principle, or substitute spectacle for politics, or treat name-calling as reasoned debate. The president won the election. Congratulate him on his victory. It's his prerogative to lay out an agenda and to make an argument against all evidence for the efficacy of big government, more Washington spending, and centralization. It's even his prerogative to argue, mistakenly in my view, that America's greatness somehow rests not on its communities and voluntary associations, its churches and charities, on civil society, but instead on the dictates of Washington. But to suggest to those of us and those of our constituents who believe otherwise don't really want the best interest of our parents or our children or our country's future is at best needlessly provocative. At worst, it suggests a troubling inability to view those who don't happen to share your opinions as beneath you. To suggest, as one of the president's spokesmen did earlier this week, that both the American political system and those who belong to the party of Lincoln aren't worthy of this White House or its agenda just isn't the way to get things done. It makes it impossible to tend to problems that we simply have to face up to, and that we'll only solve together. And frankly, it calls into question the president's own belief in the wisdom and the efficacy of the constitutional system of checks and balances that the founders so wisely put in place. The post-inaugural period is usually a chance to pivot to governing after a long campaign. It's an opportunity for presidents to reach out to the minority and to forge compromises. But that's not what we're seeing this time around. Even before Monday, we all noted the harsh change in tone, the reboot of the campaign machine, and how instead of offering an olive branch to those who disagree with him, the president had already decided to transform his campaign operation into a weapon to bulldoze anyone who doesn't share his vision. Well, I'd suggest that one thing the American people don't want is a permanent campaign. That's the last thing the American people are looking for, is a permanent campaign. They want us to work together on solutions to our problems, and deficits and debt are right at the top of the list. So I'd like to suggest this morning that the president rethink the adversarial tone he's adopted in recent weeks. Our problems are simply too urgent and too big for the president to give up on working with us. I appeal to him once again to work with us on the things we can achieve together. And let's start with the deficit and the debt. because the only way we'll be able to tackle these problems is by doing it together. If he refuses, if he insists on spending the next 4 years pushing a polarizing hard-left agenda instead, I assure him he'll meet a determined opposition, not only from Republicans in Washington, but from the very people he seems to believe are squarely on his side in the push to remake government in his image. The irony in the president's attacks, of course, is that the kind of reforms Republicans are calling for are the only conceivable route to saving the programs the president claims he wants to protect. Failing to reform the entitlement programs of the last century, right now, is the best way to guarantee they no longer exist in their current form. I mean, you could practically hear the ring of the cash register with every new promise the president made. At a time when we can all see the failure of such policies by simply turning on the news, he seems blissfully unaware of the fact that from Athens to Madrid, the sad, slow death of the left's big government dream is on display for all to see. If we want a less prosperous, less dynamic, less mobile society, that's the way to go. Just Europeanize America. The president's vision of an all-powerful government that rights every wrong, heals every wound, may warm the liberal heart, but it's completely divorced from experience and from reality. So today I'd like to do my part to bring the president and his allies in Congress a little closer down to earth. I know it may be hard for them to accept, but the reality is this. We have a spending problem, not a taxing problem, a spending problem. Let's just take a look at the chart to my right. Now, Madam President, the green represents historic and projected tax revenue. And you can see that it goes right straight across here, out to 2040. The tax increases 3 weeks ago delivered by operation of law. In other words, the law expired. All of the Bush tax cuts were over. The Congress, 2 hours after everybody's taxes went up, in other words, all the Bush tax cuts expired, restored tax relief for 99% of the American people and did it on a permanent basis to guarantee that we wouldn't have another cliff like you have inevitably when a law sunsets, you have a cliff. So the president was able to get some new revenue by operation of law, and that represents this dark blue line right across here. And you can see that's pretty steady out to 2040. Now, the president, of course, said that wasn't nearly enough. He said we need more taxes, and we'll be back asking for more taxes later. So as nearly as we can tell, based on what he has said, the taxes that he would like to add to the ones he got by operation of law 2.5 weeks ago is this light blue line right across here. So if the president were given all the tax increases he says at the moment he wants, that would provide this amount of revenue going out to 2040. As you can see, Madam President, that doesn't do anything to solve the problem because the red here represents spending in the past and the spending escalation that will occur if we don't do anything to solve the spending problem. Look at this line, dramatically going up to 2040. So as you can see, there's not enough revenue you can raise without completely shutting down the economy and solve the problem. In fact, it produces a rather static and totally insignificant amount of revenue in order to deal with a massive spending problem. So, this constant demand for more and more tax increases on what I guess people assume the more successful guy down the street may be a great campaign tactic, but it doesn't do anything to solve the problem. Even if the president were able to get every bit of taxes he wanted, you still have an enormous gap in spending if you don't deal with the real problem, which is spending. We have a spending addiction. I didn't make this up. This is a fact. This is reality. So, the tax issue is over. Congress has restored permanent tax relief for 99% of the American people. Even if the president were to get, and he will not, any more tax revenue, it's perfectly obvious that doesn't do anything to solve the problem. So, the challenge for us, and looking at the chart, you can see revenue today is just about where it has been for the past 30 years or so. The president spent nearly his entire first term arguing that we needed to tax the so-called rich to solve our fiscal woes. He harangued Congress about it. He argued for it in rallies and debates. He threatened to push us over the cliff if he didn't get his way. In the end, by operation of law, he got part of what he asked for. And the reason, as I said earlier, he got it is because the tax relief we passed in 2001 and 2003 carried an expiration date. President Obama got some of the tax increases he wanted because the law expired. And then Congress, led by Republicans, voted to make Bush-era tax rates permanent for 99% of all Americans. Now, permanency is an important thing, kind of lost on the general public. But the importance of permanency is you don't have another cliff, another expiration date where all of a sudden everything changes. Given how much time he devoted to that one topic, you'd think his tax hike would have closed the deficit, eliminated the entire national debt, and left us with extra cash to spare. But you see that tiny little blue line that I pointed to right here? That's how much additional revenue he got. This blue area is the revenue he says he wants. He won't get it, but if he did, it's pretty apparent it has nothing whatsoever to do with solving the spending addiction. So, if this revenue doesn't come anywhere close to solving the problem, the real challenge, obviously, is how we're going to control all of this red. What do we do about this? Well, we're clearly spending way more than we take in. The real uptick, interestingly enough, occurs about the time the president took office. It's been hard enough to find ways to close the president's trillion-dollar deficits. But as I just pointed out, they're nothing next to what's going to hit us when tens of millions of baby boomers reach retirement age. Nothing compared to what's heading our way. I pointed out the massive slope. That's what's headed our way. Nothing short of a bipartisan effort is going to fix this problem. And there's only one way you can do it. You can't tax your way out of this problem. The revenue question is behind us. The law we voted for, as I said, made current tax rates permanent. I'm pretty confident there's not a single Republican vote in the House or Senate to raise any more taxes. But even if we were, all the taxes the President asked for would only put us here in 2040, and look at what we'd be spending. So the reality the President needs to face, and quickly, that there's no realistic way to raise taxes high enough to even begin to address this problem. That's why Republicans are saying that we need to start controlling spending, and we need to do it now. And that's why if the President wants to do something good right now, he should put aside the liberal wish list and put aside the character attacks and join us in this great task. It is the transcendent issue of our time. If we don't fix this problem, we don't leave behind for our children and grandchildren the kind of America that our parents left behind for us. There is no bigger issue, even though it got scant mention in the State of the Union. Now, I have no animus toward the President. I just want to see him do something about the problem. Because the longer we wait, the worse the problem becomes. The more we delay the inevitable, the less time younger Americans will have to plan for the reforms we make today. And that's simply not right. So the President has a choice. He can paint himself as a warrior of the left, charge into battle with failed ideas we've already tried before. He can demean and blame the opposition for his own failure to lead. He can indulge his supporters in a bitter, never-ending campaign that will only divide our country further. Or he can take the responsible road. He can help his own base come to terms with the mathematical reality. Some people over there are living in a fantasy world, a world that doesn't exist. He could reach out to leaders in both parties and all of the members in both parties and negotiate in good faith. We'd be happy to give him the credit. It's fine by me. If boosting his legacy is what it takes and it helps the country, that's all the better. If my constituents feel like they're working to help make their future a little better and a little brighter, great. But we can't waste any more time denying the reality that's staring each of us in the face. There's only one way to solve this problem, and that's to do something about the spending addiction that's going to sink this country and turn us into Greece. Senate Republicans are ready to help the President solve this problem. I hope we have an opportunity to do so. I yield the floor.